Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. To start, we're going to go over who LabKey is as an organization, and I'll kind of give some background on myself too, as we let some folks kind of filter in, and then we'll go into the product demonstration. But thank you so much for joining. My name is Lance. I'm a product specialist here at LabKey. I help folks kind of evaluate Sample Manager, make sure it's the right fit for them, and then I also help onboard and implement the new software for everyone and act as a point of contact for anything with customer support. So to get started, who is LabKey? Who are we as an organization? We have over 20 years of experience with kind of managing scientific data. So we really have that expertise of helping folks make sure that they're capturing data in ways that make sense to them. A lot of us were scientists in the past. I used to work in the lab myself, so we're very familiar with the downfalls of different types of software that we use, or even Excel spreadsheets when we're trying to keep track of all that data. What goes wrong, and then what can we do to improve on that? Um, so as we kind of go through here, let me know what types of samples you're working with and what features are important to you. But we'll kind of start with a gist of what most of our clients have looked for when they're first evaluating a software. First, it's really important for them to identify their requirements. How is their lab structured? Do they have just one main laboratory that they're working with? Or do they have a bunch of other laboratories across different locations? How many users do they need to be in the software? And do they need to have different permissions? Do you want someone that's able to add samples and edit them, but maybe you don't want them to delete anything? Or maybe you just need someone that's checking things in and out of the freezers and moving things around. Uh, then we have folks that kind of evaluate the different types of samples that they're working with, how many of those samples that they have, and if that data between those samples are going to be different from one another. Then they need to evaluate how they're capturing their data and how they want to manage it. Are they currently entering them in Excel spreadsheets? Are they receiving electronic manifests? Or are they getting their information from different instruments that's really wanting to automatically import it to a software? And then a lot of people, when they speak to us, they just want something that's easy to use, right? They don't have that much time to spend implementing the new software and training all their users. They really want something that their users can grasp pretty quickly, and that kind of helps reduce the amount of implementation time that they have. When they're then looking at key features, a lot of them want freezer management, the ability to track any child samples like aliquots and the lineage of those samples, right? Where are they coming from? What derivatives do they have? Some folks want an electronic lab notebook or an ELN. They want some compliance support in making sure that they can stay accredited. And then some folks also want barcoding. They want to be able to quickly scan their samples in and out of the system. But then they also want to work with a vendor that they like and a vendor that they trust. Folks need to evaluate how much customer support they need and how important is it to them. Some vendors will charge more for customer support with different payment plans. Some have ticketing systems or just community boards, and then others will really make sure that you get that support that you need and they won't charge extra. Uh, Folks need to understand software updates. Some systems will outdate very quickly unless they pay for those updates. Others won't charge for that. LabKey, we actually have those monthly updates. We don't charge anything for that. That way we can make sure that your software stays up to date and it doesn't outdate. Then you need to look at the pricing models, right? Do you want a subscription plan to make sure that you're really paying for what you're going to be using? Some folks will just pay kind of a baseline, some will charge per user, and then there's different tiers depending on what features are important to you. And then they want to make sure that the vendors can support their growth, right? We want to make sure every organization is successful. And that ideally means that you're going to be expanding your lab operations, having more studies. Maybe you're going to have more users added on. Can those vendors support it and how easily can they? So with LabKey, we make sure that we include our customer support in the pricing. We help onboard everyone. We don't charge any extra for that. We have free monthly updates, and then we do make it really easy to support that growth for your lab because your success is truly our success. So we did have a poll kind of go out asking what key features you're looking for, and it looks like a lot of you are looking for that sample tracking, workflow management, test and assay results. So we'll definitely be sure to kind of go over that. As I said earlier, LabKey has over 20 years of experience. We work very closely with all of our clients in making sure that they do have that support that they need. We work with everyone from academia, pharma, biotech, and government research, with from a wide range of sciences. It's biological, geological. Really, our software is very customizable to match what your use cases need. And should we partner with you, we make sure that you have that support that you need kind of to be successful. Shifting over to Sample Manager, we really focus our software on three main pillars. That's our data integrity. We want to make sure that the data you're capturing is going to be accurate, right? You should only be able to put in a date field or date information for a date field. You shouldn't have free text for those kind of fields. We can have drop-down options to really ensure that we're accurately capturing that. And then that your data won't be able to kind of change unless you really need it to. We have very robust sample traceability, so you can always track exactly where your samples are in the freezers, down to the very slot inside of a box. We can also track samples where they are from their lineage, right? What patients are they coming from? What studies are they a part of? You can also track what aliquots or derivatives there are. And then you can also track where they are in their life cycle. What stage of their workflow are they at? Where are they in testing? Are they available? Have they been consumed or shipped out? And then our system is very flexible. So we can have as many different sample types as you need with as many different data fields as you need. Today, we're going to be looking at something that's more clinical based, but you can imagine we could just change a name to maybe we're looking at a plant, maybe we're looking at centrifuge dates and times for some of our blood samples. Really, whatever data fields you need, we can help support. So we might need to use a little bit of imagination as we go through it, but really it's just changing the name of something. So let's go ahead and get started at looking at Sample Manager. We have two main different tiers for it. We have our starter tier, that's our freezer management, sample lineage tracking, searching and reporting, and our full audit trail. Then we also have professional that goes into our assay data management, our electronic lab notebook, workflow management, data partitioning, and then communicating with other softwares with our API. We do have other softwares if you're needing something that's even more advanced than this. So if that's the case, just let us know. And then at any point, if you have any questions as we go through our demo, please feel free to let me know. We can just drop it in the chat or as a Q&A, and we'll be sure to get to them. So this is kind of my instance of Sample Manager. When I log in, I can see a basic overview of what's going on, and we're going to be seeing my cat a little bit today, so keep an eye out for him. Here is kind of my overview of the different sample types that I have. We can see that we have a bunch of blood samples, DNA, PBMC, plasma. We can even track our inventory of any of our materials and reagents. I can also see their different statuses. I can see I have a bunch of DNA samples that are available and then a bunch of them that have been consumed. Everything that you see right here can really be customized or configured to match your needs. You can have whatever sample types you need, and then you can also customize the different statuses to make sure that you're capturing what your workflow processes look like. When I scroll down, I have a summary of the boxes that I've most recently opened. So I can see I have a bag with 2 spaces available that has a bunch of samples tossed in. And then I also have my different boxes that kind of break down the different sample types in them. That way I can quickly get back to the box I was working on previously. To the right is my jobs list. These are tasks that have been assigned to me specifically, so I can see how many samples are assigned in each task, kind of a basic overview of what's going on depending on the title of that and their due date. And oops, looks like I missed a critical shipment of some samples and I can see that it's late, so I should probably work on that pretty soon. Up above, I can also have an overview of my different electronic lab notebooks. This is where I can keep track of a lot of notes I might need. Some people use it as an audit checklist to fill out some forms that they may need. Other times it's to really keep track of your experiment notes. So you can quickly get back to the notebook you were previously working on and collaborate with others in your lab. To really navigate through Sample Manager, we have this dashboard here, and it makes it pretty easy to get to what we need. We break down our data into a couple of different types. We have our source types, and this is really where our samples are coming from, right? What labs are they a part of, what patients they came from, or organisms. Then we have our true sample types. This is what we're actually working on in the lab. It's a little bit more straightforward. We have our assays or the tests that we're running on our samples, and then we have our different storage units. We can also get to any workflow jobs we have, pick lists, which is just a list of samples I'm keeping track of, and our notebooks. And then we also have these different folders, which is how we kind of partition our data and making sure only certain users can see things within a certain folder. That way, if you have something that others really shouldn't have access to, you can make sure that you fall within that compliance with these folders. For right now, let's go ahead and look at my blood samples. When I do that, it's going to pull up a list of all of my different samples with all of the different data fields that I have set up for my blood sample type specifically. With all of these different data fields, I can actually filter through these to kind of pull up all of the data that I want. So if I want to see my sample or samples that have failed my quality control, I can quickly do that. I can search through multiple of these columns and apply a lot of these filters. So it makes it really easy to see the data that I need. Whenever I'm in these grids of Sample Manager, I can select whatever sample or samples I want to work on. I can then edit them, derive them into child samples, assign them to an assay, a pick list, add them to storage or move them around. And then I can also export this list into a CSV, Excel, or TSV file. So if I need to share this data with anyone outside of Sample Manager, I can quickly do that. This is really useful if I need to ship my samples out. I can quickly get a manifest of where all my samples are. But for right now, let's go ahead and pull up Blood 4733. I like using this in my demo because I know it has a lot of data associated with it. When I click on this sample, I can see exactly where it is in storage from the freezer, shelf, rack, box, the location inside my box. I could also see that in that grid view that we saw earlier. I can see that this sample has 3 aliquots and 3 of them are available. And I can see I have 5 milliliters of these aliquots kind of all combined. I can see what notebooks this sample is referenced in, and then a list of its metadata. Something that a lot of our folks actually like is how we track our lineage with our samples. So we really try to centralize our data and give it meaning and relationships. With this lineage view, I can see that this blood sample came from this specific mouse and that this specific mouse is a part of this specific study. I can also see that it came from this laboratory. From my blood sample, I can then see my 3 aliquots, and then I can see the derivatives of this sample. So we went from this blood sample to these PBMC samples, then down to these DNA samples. This really helps keep track of our relationships, and it can also help us query these samples if we need to find all of our samples from a specific mouse or a specific study. If I click on this mouse, I can then see I have a lot more samples related to it. So you might imagine if your study has a lot of samples, maybe this view is not as useful. But if you go to the samples tab, we're going to break down all of the samples from a specific mouse, patient, or study, and then you can get some more detailed information of what's going on and further help with your studies. From there too, you can also go to our assays tab, and then you can see all of the different test results from a specific mouse, a specific sample. So you can see maybe things are changing in specific ways, but we'll go into our assays a little bit more in just a moment. Going back to Blood 4733, I can also go to my timeline. Now, my timeline is our sample-centric audit log. We can see everything that's happened to a sample from the moment we registered it all the way to we consume it. Even after we consume it, we hold on to this view, so you don't have to go searching through a very long audit log. You can quickly find it. Other softwares will delete this type of view, so that's something you might want to check when you're evaluating different things. With these audit logs, you can see who did it, when they did it, what changes they might have made, like we added this to storage. And then if you enable comments or you force comments, you can also have a reason for why someone did something. So this can really help with your investigations in case a sample goes missing or something happens with quality. Now that we kind of have our sample data, let's go ahead and look where it is in our storage. So I'm just going to click on this sample specific storage location, and it's going to highlight the exact row and column it's in inside of this box. I can hover over any of these samples, and it's going to give me the sample ID and other identifying fields that are important to me. Because maybe a sample ID doesn't really mean that much, but if I want to know either the mouse ID or a patient or a study, I can quickly see that here too, so I can get to what I'm really wanting to look at. When I click on these samples, we're going to bring up its metadata to the right so we can really quickly see important information. And then when I scroll down, I also have this box's entire manifest. So if I'm shipping this box out, I can quickly download that and send it to someone else. Let's say now I want to check out my samples for an assay run, or maybe I'm doing something else with them. For Blood 4733, I'm just going to mark, I'm going to check it out. And you can do this with more than one sample out, or you can do it just one by one. When I check out a sample, it's going to highlight this space as pink. This means that it's reserved because we're assuming once you're done checking the sample out, you do whatever it is that you need to do with it, you're going to want to put it back into that exact location. So we're marking it as reserved. No one else can check something in. If I did want to free that space up, I could just move the sample somewhere else, like a workbench, or I can completely remove it from storage. Now that I'm done doing whatever it is I'm doing with the sample, I'm going to go ahead and check it back in. And it's going to ask us how much we used when we checked it out. And we can see kind of right here behind the screen, we have 5 milliliters. So I'm going to just go ahead and say I used 1 mil. I'm going to increment my freeze thaw count, and I'm just going to put in my reason for doing this. When I check it back in, we're going to automatically reduce how much we have available of the sample, and we're going to automatically increase our freeze thaw count. This helps to make sure that we're having some real-time information of what's going on. So this is kind of how our storage units work. We can customize the sizes of our boxes. If you have an 8x4, 10x10, we want to make sure that we're matching your reality. You can also really configure your freezers to have as many different shelves, racks, drawers, whatever you call them in here. So we're really kind of matching what your actual freezers look like. Something that's also really cool is in case a freezer goes down, or maybe you need to do some freezer maintenance, you can move entire boxes, entire racks, or shelves all at once to really help ease that burden. Because I know when freezers went down in the freezer or in the lab when I was working in there, it was very stressful. But being able to do this kind of helps ease that burden. Now let's say we're wanting to run an experiment on a lot of these samples that are in this specific box. I can go ahead and add these samples to a new workflow job. And these workflow jobs can be based off of templates. It's really to help track your SOPs and making sure we're in compliance with the different tasks we need to carry out. So with these workflow jobs, I can assign them to a specific user to make sure that they're kind of in charge of everything that's going on. So I'm just going to assign this to myself, but then maybe I want to notify my manager of what's going on with these samples. I can assign a due date for when these need to be finished and a priority level. And then we can also have different data that's going to be associated with these workflow jobs. Like if I'm shipping these samples out, I probably want to know what the tracking number is in case a box gets lost in shipping. I can double check my tasks to see what I need to do and make sure it all looks right. I can also assign these tasks to individual users in case someone's really good at aliquoting samples and then someone else needs to run that assay. I can add more samples if I need to, or check for the samples that are input here so I know exactly what I should be pulling. When I finish creating this job, whoever is assigned to it will receive an email notification so they know exactly what they should be doing. And then it'll also pop up on that home screen. I can go to the different tasks, see what I need to do. I'm going to receive my blood tubes, check them in. I can then take a mil aliquot from these blood samples, and we're just going to pretend I did that. But now I'm going to actually run my assays. So these assays are kind of divided up into our run details, what's going to be the same between all these samples that we're testing. Usually it's something like an operator or a test kit. And then I can enter in my individual results for these specific samples. Now we can do this either by manually doing it, importing the data from a file like an Excel spreadsheet, or we can use an API to help import that data from another system. So really I'd be importing all my data, typing it in and making sure that we have all of our information here. This would then be central back to our samples. I'm not going to do any of that right now, but we can kind of go to our CBC and look at the different runs that we have and kind of evaluate this. Now, let's say you have specific parameters you need for your results. You might want to have the system say like, hey, if my values for my red blood cells are more than 10,000 or whatever makes sense for your assays, I want to indicate whether or not it's failed or if it's passed. We have calculated columns that can do that for us to be like, hey, let's mark it as failed if it's between this value or greater than this. So if those are failed, you can then redo another run and make sure you're doing everything correctly to make sure we're following those. But then our calculated columns can do a lot of other things. It's really great. We can calculate expiration dates, when things should be done by, really whatever formulas you need, we can try to help with that. So that's kind of how our assays are, how we're working through our workflow jobs. But now let's see, I want to track all of my experimental notes with my notebooks. I'm just going to go ahead and go to my demo ELN, and this is where my cat's going to show up again. With our ELNs, you can tag specific sources like a study or your patient, your samples that you're working with, your workflow jobs, assays. Really, all of this can be tagged so you can get some more information on them and quickly compare notes. You can have in-chart graphs or pictures like my cat showing up here again. You can have checklists of what you should be filling out and different attachments if you want to have your raw data included. With these, you also have a table of contents, so you can quickly jump from one section to the next in case it's a really long notebook. These notebooks can be worked on with a bunch of different authors, so you can all collaborate together, make sure that you're really working hand in hand. And then once your notebook's done, you can send it off for an electronic signature, make sure your managers approve it, and then you can download it and share it with others who may need it. These notebooks can also have templates. So if you want to fill in your data the same way every single time, like it would be with an audit checklist, you can do that to make sure we're really in compliance with what we should be doing in the laboratory. Now that all of our data is kind of in Sample Manager, we should probably have a way to search for our samples or search for different things. So one thing we can do, we can definitely search for samples with our barcodes. You can just scan in a list of samples, or if you have a sample ID list, you can copy and paste those in. But we also have a very powerful tool called Sample Finder, and this is a great way to find samples when we don't necessarily know what the IDs are. So if I wanted to find all my samples that came from a mouse with a bulb C strain, I can quickly find every single sample with those criteria. This is looking on the source level. I can also search for samples that have specific assay results within a specific range, samples that will be expiring soon, or something like that. From there, I can select whatever samples I want. I can view the assay results for those samples, add them to storage, add them to a workflow job, whatever it is that I need. And if you're running the same search a lot, you can also save it. So you can see I have my bulb C strain mouse. I can look for all my samples that are going to be expiring in the next 7 days if I had any of them. So it's a great way to kind of pull up those tools for whatever samples you're needing. So this is the very basics of Sample Manager, but if you like some more information, feel free to kind of put a question in the chat and I'll be sure to get to it. We can also book a personalized demo to really go in more depth of what your use case is. And our new clients usually get fully onboarded in 6 weeks or less, so we'd really love to jumpstart your success and making sure you can track your samples better. So now I'll kind of hand it over to you all as you ask your questions, and always feel free to reach back out to us. So would a custom assay implementation be a part of the pro level support? So that's a great question. Basically, everything with implementation would be supported. We help get all of these different data structures set up. We really work closely with you to make sure that we're capturing all the data that you want and getting these structures set up as you need them. We can also help import your historical data for you. So if you're going from like Excel spreadsheets, we can help get it cleaned up and imported. And that's part of that implementation onboarding time. We find that most of our clients are more successful if we help out with it, because otherwise it can take folks quite a bit of time. And that's true for any LIMS software. So we want to make sure you're successful. Is there a data dictionary for reports directly from the data using SQL? So we can definitely get some more information for you. We do have some more robust data implementations or integrations with our other processes. So if you kind of go to our website, we can look at that. Using SQL, you might kind of, depending on what you want to do with it, Sample Manager can do that API, and we can provide some more information on that. And then we have some more robust integrations using like our LabKey LIMS and then our SDMS scientific data management tool. So depending on what you want to do, we should be able to support that. Let me go ahead and pull up some other questions. And thank you so much for joining too. If any of you have any more questions, feel free to bring them in the chat. Otherwise, feel free to kind of schedule a personal demo with me. I'm always happy to kind of answer some more questions and provide some more support. If you are curious about any of our clients that we currently work with, you can go to our resource and learn from our clients. We have different webinars, publications, and case studies for them for how Sample Manager helped them be successful. And we will be having our Sample Manager user conference coming up, I believe, in March. And that's a great way to hear from our current clients. Possible to link sequence data locations on our server to sampled assay data? Yes. So depending on, of course, how those are linked up, we do allow you to have hyperlinks in Sample Manager. So if you can kind of provide that, we can definitely put that in here. That's a very easy customizable thing to do. We can also attach files depending on how large those files are. That's a great question. Right. And yes, so we do have some pretty great tools to kind of provide you with implementation. We have a data structure spreadsheet that helps you kind of understand how your data should be formatted. And then we can also help if you do have existing data, kind of understand the best ways to implement that. So that would be a great kind of resource to provide. I'll stay on for a couple more minutes, but if you have any more questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat. It was great seeing you all today, and thank you so much for attending. We'll be sure to send out a link to the recording for this webinar in case you want to share it with anyone else. And it looks like we just dropped a link to book a demo with me, so feel free to click on that too so we can chat more. Thanks so much. Yeah, so we could definitely talk about support for uploading historical data. Usually those sorts of databases can either be done through an API or you can get them into a spreadsheet. So we can kind of help with that. We've been able to help with a wide variety of former databases, and that is included in the support. So we can kind of speak more, look at what that data would look like and kind of go from there. But that's a great question. Sounds great. Thank you so much, Aaron. All right. Thank you so much, everyone. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day and have a wonderful rest of your week.